What's going on, guys? Today we finally have the 67 Mustang in the booth. It's out of the metalworking phase at this point, going into epoxy primer and then a 2K high build urethane. So we're gonna get all that started in this video. So what you're looking at right now is the epoxy primer. It's just the first coat of it. Basically just getting all the parts that I could reach on the first round. So the way that epoxy works is whenever it's sprayed on, you have a certain amount of days afterwards where you don't have to go and like scuff anything to apply more epoxy. So basically after the first round, I have up to 5 days to go in and apply another round of epoxy without having to do any crazy prep work and, you know, scuffing the entire vehicle. So people like to do this a lot of different ways. On this car here, this is gonna be a daily driver. This is gonna be probably out in the rain a lot. So with that, you know, we want to make sure that the corrosion protection is the best that it's going to get. So with that, epoxy primer is going to be a key role here. So as I'm spraying this stuff on, you're probably going to see some spots where body filler was applied underneath the epoxy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm sure there's going to be some people in the comments that have their own opinion about it. Just remember, there's multiple ways to do all this. Basically, the stuff that I knew, you know, I wasn't able to get a hammer and a dolly on some of the stuff. So I knew that I'd have to do some filler work. That's where I've gone over those areas. It's so much easier when you're in the metalworking phase to fill some of those areas because you can use a DA on it. Another way to do it is to put your epoxy down first, then put filler on those areas that I've applied filler on, but that goes directly on top of the epoxy coating. I don't like to do it like that because I just think that this way is much faster whenever you can kind of get that rough end going with a DA before you spray your epoxy primer. If possible, you want a full coating of epoxy primer. You do not want to remove the epoxy primer all the way down to metal. That just makes things way harder to sand afterward. You know, if you got exposed metal and you're trying to sand, you know, you're doing some block sanding and you've got a high spot, which is the metal, then it's just gonna make everything else just go lower and lower and lower and actually expose the bare metal. And basically all you're doing is sanding around the bare metal, making that bare metal spot an even higher spot. I'm not one of these guys that is like 100% everything gets put in epoxy. I think it really just depends on what kind of project you're building. So I think that all the paint systems have their place. So when I'm saying epoxy primer, I'm using Eastwood's epoxy primers. It's a 2-part system, 1-to-1. So you just mix, like, you know, if you put, let's say 10 ounces of this, you put 10 ounces of this, very easy. I spray it with a 1.8 tip, 28 PSI normally, something like that. So this will be what's going on there for the first round. I'll be sure to link to all this stuff down below. This is really good stuff. I've been using it for a while now, so I will list this down below. All right, guys, brief recap on the car here. And again, this is not 100% epoxy prime. So just know that like it will all be one uniform coating of epoxy primer. So this car came in, had extensive corrosion, very, very rough. So this whole panel right here, I had to replace it. That goes all the way underneath the car. Again, then we had both torque boxes on both sides. Had to redo those. Like this whole piece here was new. I had to make repairs on this side. So pretty much the whole front of the car is new. I had to make repairs to this section right here. The rockers were actually good. Those are actually a galvanized coating from the factory, I believe. So those held up really well. Floor pans, I had to do a half floor pan on this side and then just a partial on the front up there on the driver's side. So quarters, both sides. So wheel tubs, both sides. This tail panel, that had to come out. So that's all new metal. The trunk floor, 100% redone. So pretty much everything on this car had to be redone. Even some of the structure. So like you take the quarter out, and in some areas there actually had to be repairs done to the inner structure because it was rotten. So it was very, very rough. All right, so real quick, metal prep before you go into epoxy. So basically what I do is I hit everything with 80 grit and then I clean the car like crazy. And even when it seems like the car is clean, just hit it one more time just to be on the safe side. All right, so let's jump right into a first person view of me just spraying this whole car down with epoxy. All right, guys, so that second layer of epoxy went on there really, really good. So now from here, this whole front section is all gonna be black, okay? So I'm gonna go and just kind of spray the gray on all the parts that will not be black. So it pretty much just stop right here, and then we'll figure out a way to break it up. Next, we're gonna be putting on this 2K urethane primer surfacer. So that's it's a mouthful, but basically 4 parts of the primer surfacer, and then you have 1 part activator. So it's a 4-to-1. Again, this is an Eastwood product. This stuff, you can build it fairly high, and then it just makes for an excellent surface for you to sand down through. And then of course you're gonna probably have some low spots that you gotta do some filler work on. And this is just a really good foundation for that. Best part is that there's no prep work between this coat and the epoxy coating because we're within that time window. So, you know, you spray your epoxy primer on, you can immediately move into this without having to do anything. So from what I could find, it looks like the color typically extends out to here, and then all this stuff is all black. And then of course you have your fenders that sit on top of there, and then they would be obviously body colored. So I'm not gonna worry about masking or anything because the satin black coating that I'm using for the entire engine bay is compatible with epoxy primer and urethane primer. So it'll basically be as easy as just scuffing this stuff down and then immediately going onto that coat. So obviously there's gonna be some overspray up here, but we're not really worried about that because there's gonna be tons and tons of sanding going on back here. So again, 4-to-1, I'm gonna use the exact same 1.8 tip and about 28 PSI. The 2K urethane's all shot on there. And as you can see, it's laying out really good. With this stuff and almost all primers, you're gonna get some kind of like tiger striping. That's like, don't freak out about that, because I remember my first time spraying it, there was tiger striping like crazy. And if this, like when this completely flashes off and dries, you won't see it as much. But that's just where certain sections laid heavier than others and the way you overlap it and stuff. So do not freak out about that. That's something that, and this whole coating gets sanded down. So that's very common. But as you can see, I got my 3 coats on there. Everything laid out pretty good. We got plenty of material now to sand through, and I shouldn't risk getting into the metal. You know, there's gonna be the occasional time where, you know, you might accidentally sand too far, but as soon as you see metal, you just gotta stop. If you guys are doing this regularly, you gotta have a body cart. These things are amazing. I kind of held off for a while getting one of these, but I mean, it's amazing. Move it around wherever you want. It's got 4 swivel casters on it. All of them have locks on them too. It's very, very nice. All right guys, we're gonna end it off there. I just wanna thank you for watching this video. Make sure that you guys are subscribed if you wanna see this thing completely finished. This thing will be getting put together, I think pretty much for the most part before it goes home. So, but at the very least, you guys are gonna see this thing completely painted, clear coated, everything like that. So make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel if you guys wanna see that. If you guys have any comments or questions or anything, go ahead and comment that down below, and I will see you guys in the next video.